This is a quick video breaking down the poor quality of journalism in the UK. And just as a quick background, I've got 10 years experience at a senior level working in housing, so I know housing very well.
Prime Minister has promised never to let working people pay the price for an uncontrolled economy again. Yet millions of people across the UK are still facing soaring bills, stagnant wages and debt.
I sat down with Sir Keir Starmer yesterday afternoon after his Labour Party conference speech, in which he only made one reference to the cost of living crisis. And I told him about Rhonda, a single mum who works up to 50 hours a week to help cover her costs and her bills. She voted for the very first time during last year's general election, and she chose Labour, believing the party would improve her living standards. She says she now feels worse off. She won't vote Labour again. Let's take a listen to what the Prime Minister had to say, and then we'll get Rhonda's reaction.
Okay, so we've got Rhonda, looks a very sweet lady, but she's only voted once in her life. She looks in her 40s, and she expected that Labour were going to bring about a change so that she is specifically given more money. Number one, how can that possibly be? And number two, is that a reasonable expectation 1 year and 4 months into a government? Since when has any government been able to click fingers and change somebody's life? Or as adults, do we know that we are responsible for changing our lives? Governments are about presenting an opportunity to earn more, so there's better jobs out there and things like that. What it is not about is giving handouts and spoon feeding people. Let's see the rest.
I say to Rhonda that I absolutely understand the pressures that are bearing down on her, and I'm determined to change that.
How's that going to make her feel better?
Just hear me out. On food bills, for example, we work really hard to get an agreement with the EU that will mean that food bills will go down, because it will be much easier to transport those over borders. Every supermarket welcomed that deal because they knew that bills will go down.
Food inflation is way above inflation.
That is why,
and inflation is almost twice your target rate.
That's why we're taking the measures to bring those bills down, which
People
is
like
what
Rhonda,
the agreement
she's in
with the
arrears.
EU.
She can't wait for these things to
that.
happen. She voted for change, and she hasn't got it.
On energy bills, obviously we have got a scheme in place to bring bills down for millions of families, not everybody, I accept, and we will do other measures to bring those bills down.
Energy bills have gone up, Prime Minister.
I appreciate that, and our job is to bring them down.
Keir Starmer is not a Prime Minister building policy specific for one individual who gave an interview on the TV. Number one. Okay, but what he did do is what he stated, an arrangement with the EU over food. Well, the thing that he didn't mention was he got a new trade deal with America. We've got the best trade conditions of anybody in the world with America, one of our best trading partners, which means in terms of investment, which will take a little bit of time to feed through, that will result in, guess what, more jobs, more income, more investment in infrastructure, and a better standard of living with everybody. Okay, what else has he done? Since we left the EU, we have not had any significant deals around the world. At best, we managed to match the EU. It's either going to be the EU or worse, and we had no significant breakthroughs. Keir Starmer, and with the change in policy by America and with the encroaching war from Russia, has got us trade deals with Europe, and that will take time to filter through. This is his job. It's not about the micro, it's about the macro. The micro is about self-responsibility. It was mentioned that she's working 50 hours a week and she doesn't have enough money to live on. What is she spending her money on if she's working 50 hours a week and she doesn't have enough? What have her life choices been up till this point where she can't upskill or retrain or get into professions where if you happen to be working 50 hours a week, you are on the very top income, not on the very bottom income. Let's talk about personal responsibility. And again, this is a bootstraps country. We're in the West. We're not about handouts and entitlement. We need to wind this back and fight against it.
Well, this morning, we find out that energy bills are going to rise again. So Rhonda joins us now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in, Rhonda. It's really fascinating, your case, because I would say for many people watching, you represent a sort of typical story. Yeah. You voted for change. You wanted your living standards to improve. And more than a year on, how are you feeling?
Terrible. Overworked, underpaid, and little family life left now.
You work a lot of hours every week, don't you? Tell us about your bills.
50 hours a week is a ridiculous amount of hours. So she's doing a lot of hours doing what? What about the quality of journalism? So if she's doing 50 hours at the minimum, just over £21, that is £610.50 a week. This is the equivalent of £31,746 per year before tax. Her rent is £1,250 per month, which is £288 per week. She said she's about £600 in arrears and facing eviction. If the reason she's been evicted is for arrears, it is not possible to be evicted for 2 weeks arrears. It's literally not possible. The minimum arrears would be 8 weeks arrears, which is about 2,300 in terms of total arrears. Simply is not possible given the protections in the legislation.
Well, basically, my rent is £1,250 a month. I'm currently in arrears of about £600, facing eviction because of that. I private rent, so I've worked all my life, so 2 or 3 jobs. So, you know, nothing seems to be changing. Council tax has gone up, and so is my rent, and I'm facing eviction for £650 arrears.
And what about I mean, that's a dreadful situation to be in, and I'm very sorry for you that you're in that situation. When you hear the Prime Minister says, well, he's trying to get the bills down, it doesn't help you now, does it?
No, it's not, because I've had to actually come off of universal credit because you're capped on how much you can earn. So it's better to get 2 or 3 jobs. I also do life coaching, just to get an extra income to get back on top of my arrears.
And the fact that you're working extra hours in order to get extra money in order to pay off your bills means you've now breached the threshold for universal credit.
Okay, let's just stop there, right? So she'd come off universal credit due to working in 2 or 3 jobs. The presenter clarified it was due to working excessive hours. What they're really talking about is she's above the income threshold, possibly for the living element of universal credit. But a little bit later, she seems to be suggesting that she's still on the rent element of universal credit. So I believe she's not off universal credit, even though right now she's saying that she is. Interesting.
What would you say to the Prime Minister, having listened to what he said to you?
I mean, he said about childcare, but he's talking about babies. My son's 12 years old, and there isn't any childcare. We live in Watford alone. We were forced to move out of London because of the cost of London, and now we're in Watford, struggling.
You're referencing the fact that whenever the Prime Minister is asked about what the government is doing for working people, he references the hours of childcare that the Labour government has provided. But as you say, that's fine if you've got children in that age, but your son is older than that.
Okay, so now the conversation's gone on to childcare. Now, I'm a firm believer, if you have kids, then you've got to be able to look after them. If people can't afford to look after kids, don't have them. And there needs to be a safety net for the kids, but there definitely doesn't need to be a safety net for the parents who are irresponsible enough to have those kids. So even if that means saving for a rainy day so that maybe you can support a family in the future, maybe things don't work out and those kinds of things. And if that doesn't happen, then you've got to blame self and you accept the situation that you're going to live just above that poverty line, and that's where she is. Now, I don't believe in an entitlement mentality for anybody. I'm a bootstraps man, believing that you pay your own way. You don't have any expectations on the state to bail you out, that you bail yourself out. And that is an example to that next generation that you're meant to be leading, not needing to be bailed out in a struggle life. It's about responsibility and stepping up to it.
I don't get free school meals, I don't get anything, so I've got to actually do 50 hours a week, I work in domestic violence. I've worked in the job centre for 14 years, As soon as they brought in universal credit, you just think it's not going to help anybody.
We said in the intro that this election last year was the first time you had voted in a general election. You hadn't voted in 2019, 2017, 2015, when you could have voted. What was the reason that, compared to those past elections, you thought 2024 was the time to vote? And why did you vote for Labour? And I guess, why do you feel let down by what was promised?
Well, I come from a working class family. All of my family worked really hard. So I remember when I was younger, my grandmother and my mother, there was always help from the Labour Party, and the Conservatives were more for people with mortgages and everything like that, So I thought this time we need help for the single people, everybody's struggling, all my friends are struggling, we need help. So I thought I'd vote Labour, but there hasn't been any change. Everything's gone up. I mean, the price of butter now is £4, ketchup is £4.50, My groceries have gone from £50 a week to £80 a week, and then everything else suffers.
Okay, so she said that she expected Labour to look after working class people, and she made vague reference to what she expects from the Tories. And she mentioned about ketchup and butter being expensive. I think you've got to cut your cloth as you can afford it, basically. So I'm glad she didn't say that she was going out having takeaways necessarily. She can't afford it yet because, like all of us, you've got to spend within what you can afford. But if you're spending prices that she mentioned on butter and ketchup, then she's talking about brand labels more so than the cheaper alternative. So I think there is some savings that she could make, long story short. And again, it's not about me choosing how she spends her money. She can spend her money how she likes. But you got to cut your cloth as you can afford. And what you can afford is dictated by your prior life choices and even your current life choices if you're going to be upskilling in order to increase your earning potential. That is the lesson that I don't think she's learned because she hasn't made a reference to it. She expects to be bailed out by Keir Starmer, specifically giving handouts to the working classes, and that's not what it's going to be. That's not what he meant. What he meant was opportunity, and again, he's delivered on all those things in terms of future investment into the economy, and that is not going to happen within 1 year, 3 months.
Do you think Keir Starmer, when he was persuading you to vote last year, did he say to you that he could make you better off this year?
Yes, definitely. We thought, he would help single moms. He would help the normal average working person. But I mean, the average wage is 24,000 and universal credit is 22,000. So, people that are working cannot afford to pay their rent. I've heard so many people say that.
Again, she is not facing eviction and not imminent eviction and definitely not for arrears. That is a legal impossibility. Again, you need to have 8 weeks arrears. Her rent is about £200 a week. She owes £600. She is nowhere near eviction. So that is simply not the reason. And she mentioned about some help for single mothers. I can't imagine Keir Starmer going out of his way to say he's going to incentivise single motherhood in any way. But what he can do is, as I say, just general conditions of the economy for everybody, which includes single mothers. And the rest is on self. But she said she used to work for the job centres. And if she doesn't know, then why doesn't she know? Got to retrain, you got to think ahead, maybe get some advice about what pays more money than what she's on, and then she makes better use of her time. That's more or less the only way.
He says, it was a vote for a parliament. He says, I need 5 years. I'm working hard, but it's too early. He says to you, Rhonda, give me more time.
We don't have time. I'm facing eviction and battling constantly with my landlord.
What does it make you think about who's going to get your vote next time?
We have to look at parties like Reform, people that are for the people that have been here working for 42 years. What are you doing for us?
What would Reform do for you?
Yeah.
What would they do for you?
Well, hopefully they'll give us a good cost of living, everything wouldn't go up. The price of plastic bags is 60 pence,
Have they said something which persuades you they would be able to get prices down?
Yeah, they just said we're just for the general working people, they seem to care for people a lot more. It's not about privatising everything with them.
Okay, this is actually a very important point. Now, the gentleman asks her a couple of times about what is it about Reform that you actually like? Her first answer was because plastic bags are quite expensive. Now, I haven't checked everything about Reform's policy. I don't know if they've specifically budgeted so that plastic bags will come down in price. One thing she could have done is use those reusable bags, just so she doesn't have to keep on paying for bags. Word to the wise. Another thing that she mentioned was that Reform care for working people, but she couldn't and doesn't suggest one single Reform policy which will make that happen. It's just about emotion. It's just about perception about what they're going to do without actually knowing the detail of what they're going to do. And part of the reason why I said that is because Reform don't know the detail of what they're going to do with the economy. She can't possibly know because they don't know. And that's not a slur, it's the absolute fact. Richard Tice was on LBC not too long ago saying exactly the same thing, that they can't commit to a policy just now. Every so often he throws out policy references which either just don't apply or have been withdrawn, and then he just bundles forwards and pretends like he hasn't just heard information that contradicts absolutely everything that he says. Now this is very important because the government decides on everything to do with the country. And usually you decide dependent on track record, not decide upon something that they haven't worked out, so you can't possibly know, which means you can't possibly be sure that they're going to handle the key things well.
On Daniel's point about your tax cuts, raising the threshold at which you start paying income tax to, I think, £20,000
Yes.
from 12,500. 500. How much is that going to cost?
It's about 40 billion.
Not according to the IFS, it's double that.
And that's
90.
why I said earlier, because the IFS numbers are completely ridiculous. Frankly, a juvenile forecast made on the back of a fag packet.
What's your number based on?
My base is based on the calculations of 3 different economists.
Who?
And I'm not going to give their names.
Why?
But Because sometimes people give you advice privately, and that's why you go to 2 or 3 different people.
So we just trust you on the basis of 3 anonymous economists.
Well, it's funny.
We've got a war with Russia, which is on our doorstep. We can no longer rely on our main ally, aka America. So now we rely on the fragmented and historically divided countries of Europe. And we need a leader which is competent and stable. And to vote for the other thing is just going to hand victory to Russia, because there's nothing about Nigel Farage which says he's in any way credible. He's the guy that led us into Brexit. Since Brexit, do we feel that we've had 10 years of affluence?
That's so interesting because, of course, when I spoke to the Prime Minister, it was in the days after he'd labelled at least one of their policies a racist policy on immigration. Does that put you off?
No. I was born here. My parents were born here. We've always worked, and it's about supporting the people that have always been here working, the normal person.
So now she makes a very key fundamental assumption that Nigel Farage does not want to deport the working people who were born there. Just today, they were talking about people with indefinite leave to remain. And Richard Tice would not be drawn on anything, which means everything is on the table, unless, of course, you ignore it at your peril.
Let's stick to the specifics here, because you did give a figure, 234 billion. Where did that come from?
That came from the CPS, which is why it was
Centre for Policy Studies.
Which is
right.
It's based on a range of assumptions.
Can you tell us what the Centre for Policy Studies now says about that 234 billion figure?
My understanding is they said there's a range of assumptions. The assumptions could be more, they could be less. What we're highlighting is it's a figure over a 20-year period. It's unsustainable, and we're not going to allow it to happen.
Right. The Centre for Policy Studies, the CPS, now says on the record that this statistic, quote, should no longer be used. And yet here you are today on Times Radio using a figure that the source of that figure says should no longer be used.
What I've said, Andrew, and you're trying to twist my words unsuccessfully, I've said is a figure of hundreds of billions of pounds based on a variety of assumptions. It could be a lot more than that figure.
Did your parents come here for the first time, or were they born here as well?
My parents were both born here, yeah.
Right.
Also, she makes reference to her parents being both born here. So she's literally looking at a microcosm of self and her nearest people. She isn't really thinking about fairness across the board. I'm born here and I'm mixed race. My lineage goes as far back in this country as it does in the Caribbean, as it does in Africa. And who knows how things will be diced up in the future. But one thing you don't do is leave the fundamentals to chance and to the unreliable. People like Nigel Farage. Now, nobody in the country wants unlimited migration, and to be honest, I do think that migration is too high. But it needs to be done within the law, and the asylum seekers, even the ones on the boats, are actually not breaking the law. You've got these young men coming over from abroad claiming asylum, and the first clue that it's legal is that the government has a duty to house them, and they are definitely not housing them out of the kindness of their heart, as can be witnessed from the same people talking about homelessness on the streets. If there was a sweeping duty to house everybody, you would not see those people on the streets. The reason why these asylum seekers are not on the streets is because it is legal, and that is the provision within the treaties that we signed up for. Now, should we re-examine whether we push to change those treaties, whether we withdraw from those treaties? That's fair enough. But the one thing that we do is respect the law of this country, and we respect the international laws that we've signed up to, because we are not, I believe, a tin pot country. We are about stability, and we undermine our credibility if we can't respect the laws that we sign up to.
It's so interesting talking to you, Rhonda, and especially having put your case to the Prime Minister, because it sounds like he has not addressed your concerns. Yeah. And the Prime Minister will be concerned listening to you, because it's voters like you that he wants to hang on to.
Yeah.
What could he do to change your mind?
Let's get a decent wage in this country, maybe. Then we will be able to afford things and stop rising the price of food.
And when he says, I've raised the minimum wage, you get paid more than the minimum wage, so...
Yeah, no, there isn't any rise, because as soon as you rise your wage by 20 pence, your rent is going up, your council tax is going up, the petrol's going up, and everything's going up. So you can't balance it out at all.
It's all eaten up.
Yeah.
Okay, so the gentleman presenter mentioned something about the living wage, and then she said something about as soon as your wage goes up, your rent goes up, and your council tax goes up. So that tells me that she gets a council tax exclusion based on income, which goes against everything that she said about working 50 hours, because that will put her on £31,000. And she said the more that they earn, the more rent that you have to pay. And that to me tells me that she's still below that threshold for has an element of universal credit. She's not or no longer working 50 hours, and her story just does not hold true by the facts.
Thank you.
Rhonda, thank you for being with us. Really.
Let's hope the Prime
really
Minister's listening to your interview this morning.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Let's see if
The one thing I will say to Keir Starmer is there's certain people that you just cannot and you will never win over. There was a time I think he tried to win over the Reform voter, and that's when he was losing me, talking about an island of strangers, pandering to the racists, whether they are intentional racists or unintentional racists. Racist sentiment, talking about Enoch Powell, confirmed racism. But if he had a sensible conversation about limiting immigration, had an honest conversation about numbers and what he can do, which is what he's trying to do, that's fair enough. But I actually think with David Lammy being Deputy Prime Minister, he's talked some sense into this guy. Now he's calling out the racist element of Reform's policy. That's not to say that every policy of Reform is racist or everybody that follows Reform is racist, but elements definitely are. And those elements need to be called out. That is the sensible thing in order to get him re-elected, I think, not trying to play both sides of the same fence. And again, there's certain people who never win over. Let me know your thoughts. Don't shoot me down just for an opinion, not trying to shoot anybody else down there. And it's just for honest debate. And I know a lot about housing, so I was interested in watching this article. Please like, subscribe. There's Stephen. I am out.